Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Henthel. I'm a features writer for IndieWire, and please join me in welcoming our panel of USG artisans and motion picture and television fund mentors. So to kick things off, let's just go down the line and introduce yourselves. Let everybody know your name and your job, and if you're with a specific show, what shows you're with.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Felix-Hager. I'm a costume designer, and I am doing two shows right now. One is called Hacks, here we go! And the other is called The Paper.
Oh, fantastic! Yes. Fantastic, and we're clapping.
My name is Daryl Redley Fielder. I am a hairstylist, or was. I retired, 40 years in the industry. I am now an executive producer for documentary films. It's called Bearing Witness: Native American Voices in Hollywood. It's on Amazon Prime.
My name is Golden Shyne, and I am a makeup department head, and I'm here representing the Burbs starring Keke Palmer.
You must be Rob Fisher's wife. Welcome to Ashfield Place.
My name is Hope Parrish. I'm a property master, now retired about 9 years, and I mentor and work with the Culver City Historical Society, city historian now that I retired, and I love that we're here to pass the torch.
I'm Stephen Lineweaver. I'm a production designer, and I'm here for TED.
I like your shirt.
I like your shirt.
I love your shirt.
I hate your shirt.
I'm Lois Walker. I'm a retired production coordinator. I was a coordinator for 40 years and now happy to be part of Passing the Torch mentorship program.
Hi, I'm Jeff Beal, composer. I'll tell you what I'm here for, but it's fun to be back in Universal because one of the very first shows I did was a show called Monk, starring Tony Shalhoub. I am here for a much more recent show called All Her Fault.
Wow, it looks so much better on you.
No, it does not. You look amazing.
I'm Richard Walden, retired camera operator, with 57 years in. I'm here because when I started out, all the old guys were kind to me and would help me and show me the ropes. And now I figure it's my turn.
Well, I think that's actually starting out as a great topic to begin with, since we've got an audience of, I know there's a lot of aspiring filmmakers and film students, as well as people who've been in the business for a while. So I'd like to hear how each of you got started, and if the job that you ended up with is the thing you always wanted to do, or if you took a more circuitous route to it. So Kathleen, maybe you can start with what's your origin story in the business?
Well, my origin story was I was desperate for a job, and I was hired to do a very tiny job on a movie. I was able to get my feet wet on a film called Waterworld, and I was very fortunate. And I really was very green and didn't know anything, but was with a group of people that were very generous with their talents and their time and really taught me so much. And I didn't know that this is where I was going to end up to be a costume designer, but I knew I wanted to be part of the filmmaking process. And when I saw how integral costumes were in telling the story, it just really, I just wanted to do more. So that was the seed, and that was the beginning. And then after that, I just took whatever job I could get to keep continuing on this path. And that's how I started.
What was your big break, or what was the thing that sort of got you into costume designing specifically?
Well, I started, there's many aspects to the costume department. There's the designer and the supervisor and the set costumers and the craftspeople that make it. So there's a whole different array of jobs within the department. I was supervising, which means helping support the costume designer. And I worked with a designer who was really a mentor to me. And she kind of passed the torch. There is something to be said for the relationships that you foster when you start to work, and saying yes to things and not being too like the job, like the trajectory isn't straight. It's like very, you take 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward. The job that you're offered may not be the exact job that you have in your head, but it all leads to something. And each job is about relationships and the people that you meet. And I think that's what really is what's so special about film and television, is that there's so many opportunities to foster really amazing relationships with people. So I think that's really unique to this business.
I was a kid who was raised by the television. I saw Michael Jackson turn into Thriller, and I was a little kid and was like, who did that to Michael? And I was determined to find out who made Michael into this creature person. And I would walk to the library and do my due diligence to research what happened to Michael Jackson. And I came across an article featuring John Landis, Quincy Jones, and the famous makeup artist Rick Baker. And much like you, I was like, oh, it's a job. Okay, well, instead of like getting Halloween costumes every year, I'm going to get makeup. So I would beg my mom to buy all of the makeup, and I wouldn't go trick-or-treating. I'd stay in my room, make myself up into things, and then run downstairs to scare her, and she would fall out, and she was a great mom. Then I didn't have a blueprint, so this was before social media. So I was like, the next step is you go work in a Mac. I'll go work at Mac. That makes sense. So I worked at Mac during the day. I lived in Las Vegas, so I worked in the hotel system at night. I would do makeup I would tell the concierge in the hotel, hey, I'm a makeup artist. If you have anybody who needs their makeup done, can you call me? And so I built a business that way. I didn't realize at the time I was building a business. And that allowed me to learn beauty makeup and get people in the chair and hear the humanity of people. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, I feel like I learned street basketball. Now I want to go to the NBA. So I decided to come to California, attend a school called Cinema Makeup School. And I picked the school because they were all working makeup artists, all the teachers, all the staff member, they were all people working in the industry. So I was like, oh, I'm going to learn by people who are active. And I did that. And at the same time, when people would come into the Mac counter, I would be like, you do makeup? Do you do makeup for like film and television? And I would spark conversation. And a makeup artist by the name of Alma was like, yeah, I'm doing a music video. I said, oh, can I come assist you? And she said, I can't pay you. And I said, fine, I'll come. And I went, I learned so much. And during lunch, I was sitting by myself because I didn't know anyone. And the costumer, I didn't know she was a costumer at the time. She came and sat down next to me, and we had a conversation. We laughed. We talked about our lives, and we went on about the day. And then 6 months later at school, I got a call that a producer was looking for me for a small little television show that came on at midnight on Adult Swim on Cartoon Network, and it lasted for 13 minutes, 15 minutes with commercials, starring a comedian by the name of Eric Andre. And I said, okay, I don't have much experience. And they said, well, if you don't have that much experience, we can't hire you as a department head, but would you be willing to come intern for a couple days a week? And I said, absolutely. So I went part-time on my job to give time to go do this really character-heavy driven comedy sketch show. And on that show were more interns who later became producers, and I ended up becoming the department head of that show. And with those interns who turned in producers, we just grew together. We did more comedy shows, a show on Netflix, I Think You Should Leave. We all came from the Eric Andre camp, a show called The Vince Staples Show. We all came from that camp, and we've just kind of all grown up together in the industry. So it's a beautiful thing when you get to be a part of a co-creation with somebody. You're creating things. I feel like it's like a band. We're jamming out together, and we get together and we bring what we have together to make this unique sound to tell this very special story. So yeah, that's how it started for me.
Am I up? You're up, Stephen.
I started off my look for what I was going to be as an artist. I went to art school. I went to art school in high school. I ended up going to graduate school, getting a graduate degree. I ended up moving to New York City to paint and to make sculpture. And then I had to pay the rent. So, lucky for me, I had some friends that were working in the film industry, independent film industry back then, when, John Sayles was making an independent film, so was Martin Scorsese, and fell in with this fantastic group. And because I had some construction experience and could actually build a wall, I got a job. So bring whatever you got. And because I could pound a nail, because I could build a wall, I got to be a construction coordinator. And since that wasn't really my passion, and I was having budgets of $400 for the film, I sort of backed up, and I started learning the trade from the ground up. I went back and I became a prop master, a set decorator, an art director, and I went through this whole process in New York. And again, it was, I'd find myself in Harlem, on 140th Street at 3 a.m, stripping a car, because that was the next scene up, with one other person. And that was not the place for me to be. But, it was just a band of, you go to war with these people, you got a job, but there's just no. It's yes. And, there's no, I can't do this. There's no nothing. There's just a band of idiots who just decided they can do anything. And you become very close to these people. My life, I've known so many people and have so many strong relationships and have had so many experiences, and it's just a great life. I've never not done what I've wanted to do on any given day. It's scary. It gets scary as hell. Does it? And anyway, back to my journey. And then I worked with some fairly, good directors like Martin Scorsese and Jonathan Demme, and as an art director, and John Sayles, and ended up doing Dirty Dancing, which my mother never let me. It was always my mother's favorite film. As an art director. And then a production designer who knew me from New York came out here to work for Jim Brooks to do the Tracy Ullman show. And they liked him so much, but more as a writer. And he said, you ought to call this guy. And so I got to pitch Jim Brooks over the phone from New York and got my first job as a production designer on the Tracy Ullman show. And we did 7 sets a week. I pitched him idea. He wanted more of a performance than he wanted a standard sitcom setup. So we pitched an idea of 2 giant turntables and make it more theatrical so that the turntable turned, the set dressers, the set dressers, perform and put the set together, and so that was a fun little run. And again, we did 7 sets a week, and they could change on me. A cathedral could become a restaurant in the middle of the week if Jim Brooks decided that that's, the one wasn't working. So anyway, it's a great education. I got to know every prop house in town back in the day when you could actually, rent a fireplace from Gone with the Wind from Universal. And, I miss all of the scene docs and all of the things we used to be able to draw upon. But that was my start. And, he was a great storyteller. I went on to work with Cameron Crowe, great storyteller. A lot of comedians I've worked with, a lot of comedies. And, it's just been a great run.
What was the question? These are great stories. I'm having so much fun listening to you, but I think your life makes a lot of sense in the rearview mirror, and when you're young, it makes no sense at all. And I was you a long time ago. But a film composer is a strange career. I certainly didn't know at an early age that was what I was going to be, but I did know at a very early age I was going to do music because I loved it. I think my fate, in some ways, was decided at a very young age. My dad, I grew up in Northern California, took me to an assembly for the band, and they demonstrated all the instruments, and somebody played the trumpet, and I just said, that's the one. And so I studied trumpet, and it really was when I was in junior high school, I started improvising the jazz band, that I really discovered what I would call like my musical voice as a composer. I felt something inside me that was being expressed in improvising that was amazing. It was a form of expression that was visceral and immediate and spontaneous. It was just fun. It was just plain fun, and I was hooked. And a little later on, I was playing in the Oakland Youth Symphony, classical trumpet, and the other sort of a big epiphany happened. We were playing a piece by Stravinsky called The Rite of Spring. It's a ballet. It's not a film score, but it's a story. And I'll never forget the sound of being in the middle of that orchestra, hearing that amazing music and thinking, this is incredible. I want to do this. And so I knew I wanted to tell stories. I knew I wanted to be a composer, and I was composing all through high school. And really, my senior year of college, there was a course in film music, and I was very intrigued. I watched TV, went to films. I grew up in the 70s, so I saw Star Wars and Deer Hunter and Apocalypse Now and some pretty amazing movies, but I also watched TV, and there's great TV on. It was like, Rockford Files, Mannix, you name it, Bob Newhart show, a lot of trumpet in that. But I thought, that's a job. Like, people are writing music. I was a musician. I knew what music was. A lot of times a good score, you don't necessarily notice it. Then I took a class in my senior year at Eastman School of Music in film composing. I thought, this is really fun. But I really wanted to be a jazz trumpet player. I wanted to be like Wynton Marsalis. And I did make some solo records early on in my 20s. But I really I knew composing was something really special. And we moved to San Francisco. My wife sang with the San Francisco Opera Chorus. She got a job. We were young and struggling, scraping by. I made my living in New York City playing in salsa bands, which it's probably still the same, but at that time, the bars, the salsa clubs would kind of start on the weekends at 11 p.m. and go to 4 a.m., which was when the bars had to close. And so it was really amazing. And all these things informed who I was. And for example, I didn't mention it, but one of the shows I did that I had so much fun doing, even though I'm very much a gringo, I did all the music for Ugly Betty. Wonderful show with American Flower, and I had so much fun doing that. All these dots connect in beautiful ways in the rearview mirror. But when we moved to Los Angeles, I struck up a friendship with a wonderful composer named Mark Isham, who's written a lot of wonderful film scores, and he's also a wonderful jazz trumpet player. Mark and I immediately struck up a friendship. He knew some of my jazz records, and I knew of his film music. and he recommended me to Ed Harris for a film called Pollock, which is about Jackson Pollock. Mark was going on the road. I sent in some music. Didn't hear anything back, but I thought, wow, this would be an amazing movie. So obviously somebody else got the job, and they did. In fact, a few months went by, and then my agent at the time called me. He said, Ed Harris wants to talk about this movie. I said, wow, this is amazing. It turns out 2 other people had been hired to write the music, and their music had been accepted. This happens a lot. So I got on the phone with Ed, and he said, hi, this is Ed Harris. I can't find, I had your list of credits. I can't find it. I'm immediately thinking, thank God you lost my list of credits, because if you wouldn't probably pick up the phone and call me. But he said, I've got this music that you sent. I really, really like what I heard. And that was a real gift. And so I really feel like Ed gave me that gift of that movie, and Mark, a fellow jazz drum player, really saw something in me, a talent that really enabled me to have my career. I mentioned Monk earlier, and it's easy to see people with the careers and the success, but the failure is a big part of life. Rejection is a huge part of life. I audition for many more jobs than I ever get. People might not hire me for a lot of reasons, but I've also been fired. In fact, I got fired off of Monk. For the first season, I wrote the theme and I wrote the score, and at the end of that season, the producers told me, well, got some bad news for you. My agent called me and said, well, they want to change the theme song. And I was like, well, really? And so they hired Randy Newman to write a theme song. I was really disappointed, because this was the early days of the internet, and people were striding me. I had a website, and they were writing me how much they loved this theme song. I was so proud of this theme song. It was like, wow, that's really strange. I like Randy Newman, but I think my song's pretty good, And so they fired me off the show. I actually auditioned to keep the job, but they wanted to do something else. So sometime in that time between getting fired and hearing my sing song was replaced, my theme song, which had already been, I knew was going to be, it was already been taken off the air, got nominated for an Emmy Award. And a few weeks later, I started listening to the show, and there were some producers who were very friendly to me, and they were listening to, and I started listening to the show, whoever was replacing my music, and I started hearing some of my music being played on the show, and I said, I really liked, I had a producer I was sort of back channeling with. I said, I really like doing this show. If you ever want to hire me back, I'll come back to the show, And so I can't remember if it was before or after. I think they did hire me back. They hired me back sometime that summer. Later on that summer, I won my first Emmy Award for that theme, which was amazing. And I ended up scoring eight seasons of the show. So, it's a good example of how something that might seem like a failure or a rejection, it certainly was, you don't have control over that stuff. All you have control over in your life is the work you do and believing in it, doing it from your heart, and doing the best work you can, and not being afraid to put it out there. I'll tell you one more story. I fail all the time, and also entrepreneurial initiative is so important. You're never too successful to not be caring about how to move your career forward. And I remember about, I don't know, it's probably 10 years ago, I was reading the trades at the time, probably online, but I read about this new show called House of Cards that Kevin Spacey was going to be in, and directed by David Fincher. Well, it just so happened I'd been hired to write a Super Bowl commercial that David Fincher directed. Going back to the trumpet, a guy I taught jazz trumpet to at the Eastman School of Music in the summer program went on to become an ad exec, and he hired me to do this commercial for David Fincher. That's bizarre. So I had David Fincher's email address, and we had a good time doing this crazy little commercial. I said, hey, David, this sounds really cool. I'd like to send some music to you, which I did, and eventually I got hired to do the show. So, how lucky am I, to do this? And, I really look glad for this event, and I look forward to talking to you later at the reception. So thank you.
Well, I know we're burning through our time here, but I do want to talk a little bit about the shows from our USG artisans that are here. And maybe the best way to do that is to kind of circle back around to something Daryl was saying about how all of you are storytellers. And so I'd be interested to hear from each of you from the NBC Universal shows that we're here to talk about, like how you see your craft contributing to the storytelling of the show. For example, Kathleen on Hacks, like one of the things I love about the costumes is the way that the Ava character, you can completely see the evolution of who she is from where she started on the show and where she is now in terms of how she dresses.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be on Hacks since the very beginning. I was on it since the pilot. We just finished filming our finale, which will air, I think, at the end of May. So, yeah, I mean, it's been an amazing journey to be able to be a part of creating these characters. The Jean Smart Deborah Vance character is, I mean, I think she's iconic. And then we have Ava, who we meet when she's in her early 20s, and then by the time the series ends, she's 30. So I think I was really able to explore that growth with Hannah Einbinder, who plays Ava, and really explore what that change was like. And Hacks is always it's a comedy. Deborah Vance has a very sort of flashy, flamboyant wardrobe, but the template has always been to make these people real and to keep them grounded in reality. And I think Ava really illustrates that. You know, I think she's a really relatable character for people, and I really think that I'm proud of the story I was able to tell through her costumes.
And Golden, how about on the Burbs? How do you see your role as a storyteller in terms of the makeup and in terms of like sort of building a character with the actors?
One of my favorite things to do is in pre-production, we meet and flesh through the concept of the show, where you get to hear how the writers are developing each character, and how they've really broken down the nuance of the characters. So with Kiki, her character is someone who just had a baby. She's left her big city life, and now she is in a very rural neighborhood where she doesn't know anyone. So my choices for makeup were to really tell a story of a woman who is balancing transition, balancing wanting to look beautiful, wanting to present herself in the corporate way that she did in her past life, and marry that to who she's becoming as a mother. So you will see really unfinished makeups. There'll be little nuances where blush will be great on one side and it won't be on another. I thought very much about what happens when a baby starts crying. Do you finish your makeup? No. So I really took that in to really make that character live inside of the world, and also the experience of telling a funny story and bringing the truth of what really goes on in those really funny moments of transition.
Well, speaking of telling a funny story, Stephen, I actually want to ask you a question about a specific episode of Ted that is hilarious and where I feel like the production design is really kind of playing into the comedy, which is there's an episode this season where you basically bring a Dungeons and Dragons game to life and the characters are all part of it. Talk a little bit about what your approach was to that.
Well,
and hold the microphone in front of your mouth.
I'm sorry?
Put the microphone.
Okay. Yeah, our process, well, I mean, the great thing about working with Seth is that appears on the page. You know what I mean? It's like, I get to do this. So a complete fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons has a history. It has fanatic followers. So I had to pay attention to them. Luckily, I had a few on my crew. But basically, Seth gave me full reign. We designed the entire world. So where would the cave be, the forest, the castle on the hill, and we basically built that in a virtual program. So almost like a video game. Then we designed each element of it, and we sort of created our own movie. So after we had researched and paid attention to our D&D advisors and looked into what is the greatest looking tavern we can possibly make that's appropriate, and with Howard Berger and the makeup and the prosthetics, lighting with Jeff, and how can we make this just the biggest adventure? And the great thing about technically these days is You know, I have people on my staff that work in like Real Engine. So you can go in, and which is actually used, I think, for gaming at some point to design those games. But we can use it to completely previs our set. So from camera moves, you know, even if we just invent them to show our sets and what they're going to look like, our forest and what it's going to look like. And this is also a collaboration with VFX, because they're filling in the blue screen aspect of what we don't build. We build the forest on stage. We built the exterior of the cave on stage. You know, we built, obviously, the cave itself on stage and the tavern. But outside, you know, your VFX is filling in the blanks, putting the castle on the hill, putting the dragon in that we had animated. But we had done all this in my department. So things have drastically changed since I started working in this industry. And we have all these tools available to us. And then you can show the director, you know, this is it. This is what it looks like. And he was, you know, thrilled. And we got to just to play and invent and collaborate with all kinds of individuals to come up with the final look. And we love the results.
Jeff, for all her fault, I feel like the do that score was such a pleasure as a composer, because it gives you an opportunity to do a kind of like old-fashioned, old-school thriller score, like a Jerry Goldsmith, Bernard Herrmann kind of thing. And I was wondering if you talk a little bit about how you saw the role of the music in terms of telling the story, and in terms of kind of like speaking in a way for the characters, because it's like there's a lot of stuff in this where people are keeping secrets. You're kind of conveying internal stuff through the music.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about being a film composer is trying to discover what you're not seeing on screen, you know, and this is a great example of that. You know, I actually, before I was hired, I read the novel, and it's a real page turner. I mean, just like, what's going on here? You know, I talked about jazz earlier, and I really believe as a storyteller, the element of surprise is really important. It's important in comedy and in drama. If an audience knows something's coming, it's not satisfying. You want to have that ride of being in an emotional space, but then being completely surprised by something in a good way. And so I was trying to walk that line as a dramatist, but I would say the other thing that really helped me go deeper into the story was something I loved, and it's in the script, it's in these great performances, but it's just in the story. The film is on two levels. One level is this great thriller, mystery, tons of surprises, but it's also this exploration of the powerful bond between a mother and a child. And I had lost my mom, I think about a year before, not less than a year before I started the show. So I was really thinking about this powerful primal mythic connection we have with our moms, and this way in which there really are three mothers in the show, as you know, whose stories we learn about. And so for me, I was also trying to ground it in some sort of real emotion, real emotional truth. And so I think one of the most interesting aspects of that was trying to not simply thrill and excite the audience, but also get you really invested in the emotional journey of the story. And you know, Sarah, the first episode, Sarah Snook, you know, she comes to a house and her son isn't there, and I came with this. I just had this little 4-note melody. It was a very kind of strange set of intervals, but I thought this might become useful later. The other thing that I wanted to do was create the sense of the thing that's not there. And for the first 4 or 5 episodes, you don't know where her son Milo is, but he's in a way the most important character in the show. And so I added a voice soprano to those notes, and that really became the important element of the innocence of childhood. And any parent wants to protect their child. It's this primal emotional emotion that we have. And so for me, that constantly going back to the emotional truth of love in the midst of all this other really dark stuff, somehow for me gave it a very visceral and hopefully satisfying journey. It's a very messy story though, and this is something that I loved about it because it's also about the moral gray areas that we have as humans, and so I didn't want to let that off the hook in terms of the complexity of it.
Cool. Well, there are so many other things I could ask you, but I know I've already gone way over my time, so I'll wrap this up. But thank you all so much for taking the time to come and talk with us. It's been great.